everybody's caught up in it. And we haven't had real economic pain to drive people out to action.
What about the point that I made that all of the orders and rules, etc., in order to have a penalty that must be filed with the Secretary of State, and it is not filed there?
You mean the penalty, like if the mayor issues someone a $500 citation?
He's had that power. I mean, the fact is that there's an open container ordinance in Burlington. So if he catches 5 people drinking, or if the cops do rather, they can fine them. They can issue a citation under the Open Container Act.
But if they're not drinking,
I know.
what if 10 people are walking down the street holding hands and they get a citation? Will they get a citation?
No, not 2 people.
I think that the citations are going to be issued, as we've seen so many times in this city, not to the people walking down the street holding hands who look, wearing their Patagonia jackets and their loafers or whatever, their hiking boots that are out for a hike. It's going to be the people that we see that have no other place to go, that have mental health issues, substance abuse issues in the parks. That's who they want to make disappear. That's what the Church Street No Trespass ordinance was all about. That's what the smoking bans were all about. That's what all of these things are all about. And I heard today on the radio on VPR, the deputy chief of police for the city of Burlington say essentially that. He said, look, this is just another tool for us. When we see people that are doing things that is already illegal, now we can use this additional tool to deal with it. And to me, that's completely counter to what they assert the purpose is, at least publicly. They say the purpose is to protect our public health. But when the deputy chief of police says these people that are getting cited are folks that are already doing something illegal, why do we even need it then? If you can't drink in Battery Park or have an open container, then arrest people for that. Why do you need to add this new layer that gives the authorities all this additional discretion to issue citations to the undesirables? To me, that's all it is in many respects at this point.
I think it's because they realize that they don't have the authority other than existing law.
No, I know it, but they are now arresting people for just basically being together and hanging out.
They
They're
are?
not arresting them. Well,
I mean, it might be worth doing a records request to find out what are they doing? I mean, have they issued any citations? Are they threatening citations?
That's what he said this morning. He was threatening them.
Right.
He didn't say it had happened, but he said this morning that he was threatening to do that.
Right.
I have another question. The mayor has done things that, okay, I guess that some of this stuff makes health reasons, health and security reasons. Some of it does, I guess, although I think it's way over the board and way extreme. But some of the stuff that the mayor has done is also completely irrational. I've talked about that with other attorneys. Completely irrational. Why, for instance, did he shut down the parks, but then create a street for pedestrians only? Clearly, those pedestrians aren't going to pass each other. If they know each other, they're going to stop, they're going to chat in a much narrower space. I happen to think, I'll have a theory about it, but that's completely irrational to me. People can distance themselves in parks. They can't when they're passing each other in a fairly narrow street. Closes it off to traffic, but this is why. He wants to close off the whole city to traffic.
So what street is that?
There's more than one, I believe,
Oh.
but Birchcliff Parkway is the one that I just passed on the way to Grant's house. Birchcliff Parkway is now not open to cars. It's open to pedestrians. It's open to bicycles. It makes no rational sense.
But it's not a constitutional issue.
It is if he has
No
not, if he doesn't, wait.
No constitutional.
No, come on, Barry, will you wait a minute? He assumed the power to do that. He said it was within his emergency powers because he thinks he has emergency powers also.
He could close the parks at any time for any reason. That's not a constitutional question.
If he is restricting people's freedom, it is.
I mean, I guess to support Barry's point, I mean, they routinely close the beaches here
I
for
know,
health purposes
for health purposes.
because there's blue-green algae that
Yeah.
accumulates in the water.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah, but this has no health reason. That's
what do you
right.
mean? The COVID-19?
What?
Yeah.
No,
COVID-19 is
no. He closed the parks, but he
right.
opened up another public space for people to gather. What I'm arguing is that it's irrational.
So
I'm not
here's the just a quote from. I mean, again, this is why I get back to. I think our to the extent that there's folks out there that want to challenge these things. I think the laws are written in such a way that it'd be very difficult. So John Franco shared this with us, and I'll read you this. So, if we don't like it, we should get city council to change it. It says, emergency powers and duties of the mayor. And it says, one of them, during any period when disaster threatens or when the city has been struck by a disaster, the mayor may promulgate such regulations as he deems necessary to protect life and property and preserve critical resources. Such regulations may include, but not be limited to, the following: regulations prohibiting or restricting movement of vehicles in order to facilitate the work of emergency management forces or to facilitate the movement of persons from critical areas with or within the city. B, regulations pertaining to the movement of persons from areas deemed to be hazardous or vulnerable to disaster. Or C, such other regulations necessary to preserve public peace, health, and safety. So I'm sure what he would say is, I'm closing down these streets because I want people to walk there instead of all congregating at the beach, and I deem that necessary. And he may be dead wrong, but we've given him that power.
I know. Okay, can I say
Wait
one
a minute,
thing?
wait a minute.
I
Where is
agree
that
with Jared
authority?
that it's a political. I agree with Jared that it is a political problem. I agree with him that the courts are now closed. That's why I think we should have discussions about this, because there are political consequences to everything that's happening in this stupid place. Political and
I would just
economic
add, I would just add, I think we would lose in court, but I do think there's always perhaps political value in a lawsuit. If
Except money.
Tensions, even if you lose, there can be. If you look at movements over history, whether it's civil rights, whether it's environmental law, there have been lawsuits that help elevate it to the public consciousness.
Right.
So I don't think
could
they're
I interrupt here?
invaluable.
I'm going to interrupt
Hands up.
here
Yeah.
because we have, I think, 4 lawyers on this call, and 2 of them have to let other people speak now and then. And should we implement raising your hand? Barry, are you able to raise your hand?
Yep.
You have to put your hand in front of your face for us
Oh,
to
you mean
see it.
literally do it?
Well, now I see it. Now I see it. So if you do that, then should I be the one who calls on people or something?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So Barry, you were trying to say something, and I think Kurt was trying to also.
I went through the city charter doing a word search for emergency, and I did not find any of the language that you just quoted. Are you sure it's in the city charter and not just an ordinance passed by the city council?
Jared, you're asking that question to Jared,
Oh,
right?
No, it is an ordinance passed by, it's Chapter 11, Burlington Code of Ordinances, which is referenced by the charter. So you're right, it is something passed just by city council. It's not
Okay,
a
but there's not
it's not a
the
charter
word.
issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
The word emergency does not exist in the city charter, other than emergency loans.
But he said it was in the ordinance. Is that true
Right.
or not, Jared?
No, that's right. It's in that. What I was reading was from the ordinance. It's something that the city council passed.
Do you know the date by any chance? Does Franco have the date?
He didn't. He didn't.
Okay, so my comment has been the same since the beginning of this crisis. It's a political problem, it's an economic problem, and it has to be solved by politicians, and they've all basically gone home. So it's up to citizens is the point. I think I've noticed something else. This was commented on by a reporter last night. that we didn't elect doctors to make these decisions or scientists. We elect politicians to make these very critical decisions. And I guess I just want to mention that because I believe that in some ways that Mayor Weinberger is taking advantage of this crisis, as is Scott, as is, I guess, I don't know if, I mean, I guess you could say Trump, he's certainly going to take advantage of it in the election. But they're all going to try to expand their power as much as they can. And I think that's a citizen's problem and not really even their problem, but it's our problem.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Josephine Corcoran. Are you here? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm needing to make my dinner, so I'm listening rather than participating and adding comments.
Okay, and it's a new name for me. How did you know about this call?
Through Front Porch Forum.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Right.
Wonderful to
Yeah.
know that people read it. Well, thank you.
I've
Yeah,
had
well-
some concerns about how power is being used
Right.
in this crisis, so I was interested in listening in.
What
Yes.
are your concerns? Can I ask you that? Ms. Corcoran?
That we are not, that we have dismantled
Mm.
the economic structure that we usually have surrounding us. And for an indefinite period of time, I think there are both possibilities for people to come forward and give weight to community connections. I think there's also a useful vigilance to seeing that our rights and our voice in government is not eroded.
Thank you. It's my
Yeah.
feeling too. Thank you.
And I think people should look at, read about what's happening in Central America, because apparently Guatemala and El Salvador have initiated very strict shelter-in-place rules, and then they can the police can just go around and nab people that they want without, without any permission. So that what's happening there is what you seem to be fearing could happen here, but it hasn't happened yet. But once the laws of shelter in place, for example, and no one can move around, then people who have to sleep in a different bed every night because the authorities are after them they're stuck, not to speak of all the drug dealers. What are they doing? But anyway, I think they're having a really dire time in Central America.
Well, they're having a dire time in a lot of other countries, and that's another reason I think these discussions are so important, because people forget solidarity too easily. I feel that we forget the international scene totally. I've had sort of that argument with other people right now, because they center their focus on the United States and on Vermont. Well, we haven't totally lost our liberty yet. Other people have. If you're on, oh, everybody's gone now. What happened?
Nope, we're back.
Oh, okay. So every time in India, for instance, as Kurt probably knows better than I, in India, for instance, if people are on the street, they get beaten by the police. Where are people in India supposed to go? Huge homeless population. Huge. Where are they going to go to be off the street? I think we forget that still, in some sense, social isolation, distancing is really a privilege of people who have a home in the first place. And we really have to think in terms of other people in other countries. Anyway, and I thought that from the beginning. This gives, in other words, the police the power to do things that they should have very limited power to do.
Kurt, do you have any updates on recent events in India?
I mean, I don't, aside from what Sandy mentioned, what I was going to say is, since Sandy brought up the international scope of this, it'll be interesting to see, since Italy has been a few weeks ahead of us
Mhm.
with respect to the virus, and Italy being, a democratic country unlike China, how they quote unquote return back to normal when it comes to a rights perspective. China, the area that was affected, where the origin of the virus, they opened up in the
Yeah.
last day or two. If people have seen images of that, but I mean, China's a difficult example for us to compare to. Where with Italy, it'll be interesting to see, how people's rights have been potentially curtailed by law enforcement there, and see, obviously see what impact that has here. Will things ever go back to normal again, quote unquote?
That's my fear. Certainly without a political demand, they will not. They will not. They won't automatically go back to, they will keep whatever rights that they've already taken away.
Well,
from us.
even
Unless-
rights, Sandy, that we've that we don't necessarily exercise on a day-to-day basis, but with respect to surveillance, the New York
Right.
the
Right.
New York Times, for example, in the last couple of days, of course, their objective was to inform, but they've been using cell phone data to see what parts of the country have been compliant with stay-at-home orders or recommendations compared to other parts. Well, how are they getting that information? They're not calling people up and conducting surveys. They're looking at data, intelligence data, of people's whereabouts as they go around, and really going about their routine days. The Israelis were probably the first country to, take advantage of cell phone tracking with respect to the coronavirus, and it was, looked at as a very progressive and aggressive means to try to, curtail the virus spreading. But that's come here too.
Right.
So is that a big story compared to, the daily death toll in New York? No, but I think in the future it's certainly an additional tool that not only local law enforcement, but even at a national level, they'll be tracking our whereabouts if they haven't been doing so already.
I mean, they probably have been doing it already, but this allows them to do it with our permission.
With impunity, yeah.
With impunity. I mean, we are so shut down in our thinking. We're so shut down in any kind of political movement by this crisis. We can't meet together.
Okay, Jared would like to say something.
Where is he? Jared? No, he's gone.
Jared's
No,
gone.
he's there, but he's
That's better. Sorry, I was still mute. I was just going to say, maybe we're thinking about this, this idea we want to go back to, what we had and make sure we have these rights as protected rights. I think that's fair, but maybe what we should really be doing is trying to take advantage of this as, in terms of a political opportunity. And let's not just go back to what we had before. Let's talk about how we can go further, how we can protect rights more broadly, how we can expand sort of democratic principles from constitutional rights to healthcare to all of these other, anti-poverty efforts. I mean, if you look at a lot of crises over history, sort of the progressive movement came out of some of those crises. So maybe we should be talking about it that way.
And I would like to say that I think we're going to start hearing from sectors of the population that aren't usually getting out there with revolutionary fervor. And those will be the people who have been, basically shat upon up till now and are providing basic services. For me, the most moving moment in the last few days was, and I forget what station it was on, but a guy who was a nurse, I guess, got ill and died, and all of the other nurses and workers in that hospital lined up as his body was rolled down the hallway. And it just made you realize that these people are in an incredible situation here and under incredible stress. And they have been, were under stress before because our healthcare here is so horrible. I mean, surely there's going to be an uprising from people like that saying, demanding, justice, demanding Medicare for all, and other things. And so we have to join them when that happens.
Well, I
Do you-
think
do
we
you
should
really-
do it now.
Yeah, Jared. I mean, no, it was Kurt. Kurt.
No, I was going to say, and then Sandy, if you want to jump in, that I'd like to think that, but
Yeah.
I mean, Americans are typically complacent, after these, events, and I'd like to think that people are going to be out with revolutionary fervor and demanding rights, but the skeptic and the skeptic in me tends to think that we're going to go back to the closest thing that resembles normal,
Yeah.
even
Me
if
too.
it's not normal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, of course.
I mean, look what happened today. The chief contender who should be arguing, and he might continue to argue for Medicare for all, is Bernie, and he dropped out of the race. Now, he didn't completely drop out of the race. He's going to
Right.
continue to have his name on the ballot, which means he's going to collect delegates enough, perhaps, to put him in a bargaining power with the convention. But let me remind you that if Joe Biden gets his way, which he will, the convention will be a virtual convention, and we, for instance, will not be able to protest at that convention because we've lost our rights to assemble. Right? Am I wrong?
Nope, you're right.
So what do we do then? And I also think that Jared is right that we should be thinking about a brand new society, but we can't even do anything political, in my view, until, and we can dream, but we cannot do anything really political until we at least approach or get back to what we, I guess, accept as the status quo. We cannot, it doesn't seem to me, effectively politically organize. That's what I'm in grief about.
Let me just say that I just got a call from someone from Windsor, which was a Bernie Sanders office, saying that tomorrow he is going to offer a town meeting with Phil Scott and Pat Leahy,
Mm.
all the big guys, on the coronavirus epidemic.
So who called you? Who called you?
Someone from Bernie's office. It was a machine call. So I'm sure all of you will be getting that. And I think he said 5 or 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Where and how? A
Well-
Zoom thing?
Yeah, it's a webinar. Once I get it, I will. He said that he will be letting me know. But I mean, why is he calling me? Aren't you all receiving stuff from Bernie?
No.
Yeah.
Not that.
I got the call
Yeah.
also.
Well, anyway, I'll send you if you're interested. I assume
am.
it will
I
be
am.
give and take as part of the discussion.
Mhm.
But it's interesting, Republicans and Democrats getting together and being friends.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes that's nice and sometimes it isn't so nice. If they're going to do it to use an excuse to increase the power of the police, I'm not so thrilled.
Well, here's the other thing. I mean, getting back to sort of that, at the beginning, we talked about these principles of federalism and,
Right.
and states being able to try different things and us having more political power at the state level than the federal level. I think we have even more political power at the local level.
Yeah.
And I think historically, Burlington has been a city that's been a leader in many respects. And it would seem to me that, yes, right now we can't be out there, say, protesting, but virtually we are assembling here and we're talking about these ideas. And I think when we come out of this, hopefully in the next several weeks or month, that coming together around some efforts at this local level to build a better community, reinstill or go beyond where we were before is a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, and I think, the mayoral election will be in March. I mean, that might be at least something to organize around.
Well, I had a long conversation with both Steve Goodkind and also John Franco, who really, I didn't realize he had sent around any information because he was so mad at me. I didn't get it, but I had this conversation with both of them today, and they both said, "Oh, basically, shut up about politics. We shouldn't be talking about politics because no one, quote, is paying attention to anything political." I don't think that's true, but if so, then it's up to people like us to raise consciousness again about politics, because there's only going to be a political solution. There is really not a scientific or a medical solution. They're telling us that we have to wait for a vaccine. What? That could be 18 months. That's really what Moreau said the other night. Everybody watched his speech, or did they?
No,
Okay, so what he said, if anybody cares, Robin, do you? What happened to Robin?
I didn't get to watch him, no.
Okay, he said there are going to be 3 stages to this. First stage is where we are. Second stage is if the numbers look good, which by the way, they do. If the numbers look good, then he will allow maybe a little bit of a return to business. If the virus is not, if it reoccurs, then he will shut down again, and that he will do that until there's a vaccine, which could be 18 months. Nobody can survive that. He's got to be challenged about that.
Mhm.
But I also think, getting back to this opportunity, granted, there's only 5 or 6 of us on here now. Last week, I think there were 17 or 18 people that came to hear Kurt's talk. So, I mean, I think to the extent that there's we always talk about, well, when there's an emergency, someone's going to come in and assume power or take power.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we be that?
How do you do it?
If there's not people, if people aren't particularly engaged, why can't we be that group of people that helps fill that void with these sorts of events? And maybe we can build them, bigger and bigger. It seems as though
Well,
even though they're virtually, 17 people last Wednesday, to talk about India and Kashmir, I think is pretty impressive, quite frankly.
yeah.
I bet you the mayor doesn't get 17 people to come to his bagel cafe meetings, and he's not even having them now. So don't we have an opportunity perhaps to engage?
Well, all the groups are having these kind of Zoom meetings, like Rights and Democracy and Migrant Justice and so on. So we should plug into their meetings. In fact, I went to the Rights and Democracy one, and it was focused largely on, nurses coming on and talking about the situation in their hospital and so on, very focused on the first providers. But they will be up in arms if those people are not taken care of.
I have to step away for a minute. I need to take the dog out. I'll be back in a minute.
No, I think that obviously Jared's right. And of course, that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm trying to organize as many of these as I feel like I want to do. It's just not the same. You can't be together in face-to-face discussions and plan organization and plan protest. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. And I'm not certain that it can be effective. Of course, Jared, I would like in the vacuum to assume leadership. I just have no idea how to do it. Without having some kind of political events, I think we should be planning right now to oppose the mayor.
Who's thinking of running against him?
Huh?
Who is thinking of running against him?
Jared was, and if Jared won't do it, I'm even thinking of do it. I know I'm too old, but somebody's got to do it. They have got to do it. Because this mayor, the other thing that I think about the mayor politically is that he has essentially destroyed the city. And he's going to get away with it because he's going to have now this emergency. And he said in his State of the City address that is all he's going to deal with is the emergency.
Well,
not
but
gonna
none
deal-
of the projects that he's working on are going to move forward either.
That's right.
Which, I think, he was probably hoping to have the big hole finished up by, whenever, City Hall Park finished up by whenever. So those will continue to be liabilities. And I think, until the state of the city address or whatever, I feel like the mayor had been pretty silent, absent, while people are literally dying. And Burlington, it pops up in the New York Times as a hot spot.
Right.
Did it really?
Pretty,
Yes, it did.
yeah, per capita, we have, more deaths than many other
But we-
towns, cities around the entire country. I mean, I can't, that's baffling. And until recently, I thought the mayor had been pretty much silent.
Well,
But
aren't
he-
progressives running a candidate?
Have no idea. I think that some progressives are, I don't know what Steve Goodkind calls himself, but I think they're thinking of Ali Dieng. I don't happen to think that he could win. It'd be a good idea, but I don't think he could win. I think you have to have a plausible candidate. And I guess I just don't think he'd have the power to win. It'd be nice, but I think that will also split the vote on the left anyway. Maybe Karina, maybe, but she doesn't ever get back to anybody, right, Jared? You've asked her, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like she's the wild card in all of city, politics in terms of the mayoral race. If she decides to do it, I think she's probably pretty hard to compete with.
Unless someone contests it on the left too. Unless there were two.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what what's his face did last time.
Infinite, right?
Infinite, and I mean, I guess he got 12-13%. That's certainly legitimate showing, of course. But to me, yeah, it's in many respects, I feel like she's the wild card in all of this. And if she decides to do it, I think you'll see a lot of people. You hear Franco and Brian Pine and all these other names. I think they'll probably. My guess is that she probably would corner the market.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot.
But anyway, this is what I see panning out for all the politicians. Scott, particularly Scott, the mayor, the president. They're all going to say that they saved us in some way from this crisis, and they're going to use that to be the heroes. And I think it's got to be challenged in some way.
How do you challenge that, Sandy? Because I agree with you. That will be used as a moment. They'll look. Typically, people like to gather around and cheer their president or mayor or whoever it is after any kind of crisis, even if they did a lousy job.
But aren't these leaders all saying that we're in this together? It's all that we're doing that is evening out the curve and all of that.
Sure,
So
they're absolutely. They are doing that, but it's to their political advantage too.
Yes,
It's not.
I know.
It's not.
But Trump didn't do it, and I don't see how he can assume that people will feel he's done a good job, because he's done a horrible job.
I'll tell
But
you
Robin,
how.
at the same point,
I'll tell you how.
I agree with you, Robin. But at the same point, if you look at his polling numbers,
They're going up.
they seem to be going up. That says otherwise. I don't know why, but it just seems to be the case.
I'll tell you my theory if anybody is interested at all. I think that Trump's a shoo-in because he is going to open the economy. And
Right.
you'll see the economy boom after him, after he does it. He's determined to do it. The Democrats aren't determined to do it because they don't want him to have that kind of a victory. He will do it.
Maybe, Sandy, but Jared and I had a conversation that the full economic fallout from this, I don't think is going to be felt for months, even after things are
agree.
opened up.
I agree.
So
I
as
agree.
far as him having a grandstanding moment because he opens up the economy, that may not necessarily happen. And I'm regardless of who's running against him, I'm just talking about Trump, by himself in terms of his actions.
And he
Yeah,
can't
I
open up the country. The governors decide at the state
know.
level,
I know.
getting back again to what we said at the beginning. And yeah, Kurt and I were talking about this today, and maybe you and I did too, Sandy, but I think that the economic harm is going to be such that
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to just turn the economy back on like a light switch.
Right.
You know, all of these people that lost their jobs, they're not going to be spending money at restaurants. They're not going to be spending money as consumers, which is 70% of our economy. They just aren't going to have the money to do it. And even if they do, a significant portion of the population isn't going to feel comfortable going out to dinner just because
Right.
Trump says it's okay now, or
That's
Scott
right.
says it's okay.
I'd like to welcome Sarah, who's joined the call. And could you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name is Sarah Fitch. I live in the New North End of Burlington.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Sarah Fitch.
Okay.
Sarah Fitch. Okay, well, welcome. How did you hear about this call?
On Front Porch Forum.
Oh, good, good.
That's great.
It's nice it works. Well, we've been going for about an hour now, and I think we might go 15 or 20 minutes more, and I want to bring up another legal issue that I think is of interest, but I will save that till we're through talking about, this current crisis.
I want to just interject. I'm going to need to leave because I've got a phone call now, but I wanted to just ask if 7 days, if any of you have considered that 7 days maybe could play a role in bringing more focus to the downside of the shelter in place.
Well, that's very interesting. We
Yeah.
tried to put the notices of this event, and this has been a series of events, in 7 days, and somehow they said they were not taking calendar items anymore.
Wow.
I'm not suggesting calendar items. I'm suggesting a story.
Yeah.
Oh, well, of course, yeah.
Suggesting, I don't know, a letter to the editor or
Well, we should invite someone from 7 days to participate in one of these conversations.
Right.
We've all seen
That'd be a
the
good
latest-
idea. Yeah.
the latest call of Trump throwing out toilet paper.
Yes.
Haven't seen that.
I haven't
I'm
I'm
gotten
gonna need to go, but thank you for gathering, and I hope to be back.
I think it's
Oh,
a
Just
great
to
idea,
add,
Josephine.
thanks,
Thank you.
Josephine. Just to
Okay.
add to Josephine's comment, my office is actually in the 7 Days building in Burlington,
Oh,
and they're still publishing as Robin just showed us by holding up the paper. But they announced that they have laid off a substantial portion
Yeah.
of staff.
Yes, they have. Yeah.
Substantial. So as far as I don't know what their means are to accomplish a lot of things that the public may want them to
Yeah.
want them to provide as far as a service.
and how about Vermont Digger?
They report stuff still.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I've thought that we should, or I or somebody should contact them and tell them just a little bit about these things that we're doing.
Right. Invite them to the conversations.
Yeah.
That's a
Or,
great
you know,
idea.
Robin is recording these also, and Lauren Glenn emailed me today and told me that they're going to begin to play these recordings on CCTV. I don't understand why she closed her studio, by the way, Kurt. Because Kurt and I do a program on CCTV called What's Happening. Anyway, I don't know why.
I think there is a great story here about civic engagement in the time of COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do, and I think it would generate additional interest, additional people showing up. And I know it doesn't feel the same as holding traditional sort of organizing meetings. I agree. It's nice to engage and eat pizza together or whatever you do at a community organizing meeting. But I do think this could become even bigger than it is with a little bit of that media engagement.
Maybe I'll call Paula Routley tomorrow about it, because I know her kind of. Robin knows her too, right, Robin?
Yeah.
But I'll try to do that. But I want to add something else about Donald Trump. Even if the economy doesn't recover quickly, at least he will be perceived as trying to do that. And I think he's a shoo-in. Besides which, I think that the Democrats have really fixed themselves with a candidate that just can't win. I mean, I don't think that anybody could perceive Joe Biden as a person who could handle this crisis.
Okay,
I
Kurt had
can't
something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. You know, since our topic is partly about the federal Constitution. You know, Jared brought up an interesting point during his last comment regarding the governors really being responsible for opening up the economy, not the president in his sole wisdom. And one of the things, you know, that I thought about was the Constitution for this type of issue, meaning the COVID-19, you know, issue. It seems like it's a dated document and not really up to snuff to handle this type of thing. You know, the Constitution still has mention of, you know, how to work with the Indian tribes, with foreign enemies, and gives, you know, the president as well as the Congress a great deal of authority in engaging in those types of relations and commerce for that matter. But when it comes to something like this, you know, the federal government doesn't have a whole lot of power to handle, you know, so let's say if this virus was, you know, a lot deadlier than it even is, you know, that you, upon contracting it, you die on the spot. You know, we've had a situation where 50 governors are doing 50 different things. You know, we don't have that when it comes to when the enemy happens to be foreign or of a foreign nature in this country. You know, think Arabs or Mexicans.
But at wartime, the president takes executive power very.
Absolutely, against a foreign enemy. But Trump has called this a war. You know, a lot of the other politicians, even adversaries, have called this a war. And a lot of it has come down to what governors do. And there's still a number of states in this country that have not enacted anything at all.
I would.
So it's just kind of an interesting thing, you know, that for this type of an enemy, you know, I know we're talking about rights being taken away, but at the same time, you know, it doesn't really arm the federal government with a whole lot of power to combat this.
Yeah,
that's it.
Jared.
Shut up.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good points, Kurt. And I would say, I mean, I loathe President Trump, but I would argue that he has played this in many respects beautifully.
Really?
And I don't mean that as a compliment. I think politically, what he's done is he's cornered the market on being able to say, I'm a wartime president and sound strong and, you know, we're going to war.
And be on television every day.
He's on television every day. And he's also sort of played the states' rights thing to the point where, you know, I'm letting the governors do what they need to do, states' rights. And that's going to ultimately allow him to either take all the credit or get rid of all the blame. So if the governors screw it up,
right,
blame it on the governors. If everything becomes, you know, much better, he can say, I was the wartime president, I took charge. And so the political strategy of that, you know, I hate Donald Trump, but I think he's
well, that's just the same strategy. It's just the same strategy he uses with his you know, appointees that are substituting, or what do you call them when they're temporary? Yes, they're
Provisional, yeah.
Yeah, but
so that way he can take the blame. I mean, shift the blame when it's their fault, or take the credit when they do something right. So he always pushes it off to someone else.
No, I agree with both your points that from a political expediency standpoint, you know, he's playing it right, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just talking about from the standpoint that if this virus was, let's say, 10 times as deadly, let's say it was as deadly as Ebola, where, you know, it's not, you know, it's not about social distancing and doing the right thing, that this will just kill you outright. I don't think our Constitution gives the president adequate power to take on an enemy like that.
I don't want it to. tell you the truth. And I think that,
Well,
I think,
right, but let's say this was, again, I'm just going to go back to the point. Let's say if this was a lot deadlier than it was. If the enemy's foreign, the president could basically, just take action, like Robin said, under wartime powers. But if the enemy's not foreign, and they're not, a member of the Indian tribes, then you kind of have a hodgepodge of state responses.
Right.
but I think that's good, frankly.
Well, not if this was Ebola. We would have, a mass dying off of the population.
I think it's a good idea that he has given for instance, I saw South Dakota, the mayor of Sioux City last night. And in South Dakota, there aren't that many cases. There certainly aren't that many cases in the rural areas. So why shouldn't South Dakota manage South Dakotan affairs in the way that's in the best interest of South Dakota? I don't get it.
Because the thing is, Sandy, at the same point, that works if people in South Dakota stayed there. But then if they're coming from New York and going back to, to Broadway to see a play,
But no, there's no plays on Broadway right
I
now.
know. I mean, that's an extreme example, but if you can fluidly travel between the states,
But you can't right now.
sure you can. And a lot of states have not enacted anything.
Well, I think that they are basing their decisions on local realities. I think that's good.
Which are subject to change if the
Yeah.
bad guy comes in from another state and drives in.
No, not necessarily. Not
The
necessarily.
virus will get there also, Sandy. I don't know
I
why
know.
you think it won't.
But nevertheless, the virus, for instance, Germany, they're doing their own thing. Sweden's doing their own thing.
Sweden's rethinking it now because they've got.
Okay, I know they're thinking all the time. They're Swedes. They're not Americans. They think, first of all, and second of all, I still think that the results of all of this might be the same in the end. And I do think that local conditions have to be taken into account. Have a travel ban.
Yeah, I mean, my point is, unfortunately, the virus doesn't exist in a vacuum with respect to local considerations. If there's fluid movement back and forth from a state that's doing its own thing, then they're not necessarily, the people aren't necessarily safe.
But you can also have you could have a travel ban if that's what your concern is. Or you could have a test of the people coming in.
Okay, should we talk for maybe 5 minutes more, and then I will bring up my other legal issue that I would like to explain to you?
Why don't you do
Can
that
I,
now?
can I say something here?
Yeah, where have you been?
Getting back to the limited powers of the president, where the enemy is not a foreign power. The Constitution would allow the legislature, the Congress, to pass the law in furtherance of the general welfare, health and safety, etc., giving essentially the same power to the president that Vermont has given, that the Vermont legislature has apparently given to the governor.
Well,
They haven't done that yet,
let me just say,
and I don't think they would with Trump.
in the end, though, the same thing is true even during wartime. War is declared not by the President of the United States, but by Congress.
That's the point, part of the point I'm making.
Right. So in other words, even his power is limited if we choose to make it limited. The fact is that we've given the president and the governor and now the mayor enormous power, and that is a political problem that we have committed.
The only power that the president is exercising is the power to handle emergency management of resources. And I think everybody agrees he's been doing a terribly fucked up job.
I don't even
He has
understand that.
he
I
has
don't
not
agree.
given anybody an order that they must do something or prohibited them from doing anything.
Okay. But maybe we have about 5 minutes left, maybe, Robin, and why don't you talk about your problem?
Okay, maybe everyone knows I'm very concerned about nuclear issues, and I received this newsletter, which is called Nuke Watch. And in it, they talk about the judge in the case of the Kings Bay protesters who protested down, I think it was in Georgia, at the Trident submarines. And one of the people lives here in Vermont, Martha Hennessy, who is the granddaughter of Dorothy Day. And the sentencing hasn't happened yet, but that judge said that they could not bring up the necessity defense. This is the issue I'm putting before you right now, the necessity defense. It's called, you lawyers there, it's called motion in limine.
Yeah,
Do you know what that means?
yeah, it means motion to limit the testimony. usually.
Limit, or a gag order. So we all here in Burlington know about the necessity defense because it was used in a case with the Winooski 44 in 1984. And Judge Macaulay,
No, Judge Mahady, and I was one of the lawyers.
Mahady
Right. I was one of
permitted
the
it to be brought. We had a wonderful trial bringing in,
Ramsey
all
Clark.
sorts of Howard Zinn and other people and refugees and so on. And we won. I mean, the jury decided in our favor. So this article, though, talks about how there is a general federal appeal courts agree facts about nuclear weapons can be hidden from juries in protestation. So they are prevailing now
Right.
with this gag order thing. The judges are agreeing around the country. And I think we need to speak out and bring forward what happened here with the necessity defense and the use of the necessity defense. And so I'm thinking of a Zoom call, yes, that with Martha Hennessy and with some of the people who were involved with the Winooski 44 and lawyers that can argue eloquently in support of it, and then that would be recorded and sent out, beyond Vermont, because it would be sent down to Georgia. It would be sent down to places that need to hear about this. That this is assault against justice to limit the ability for the defense to refer to why they did what they did. So I mentioned this to Sandy, and she's agreed that it could be one of our Zoom things, but it would also involve Will and other groups that are concerned about this.
I really would like to do it. I can just tell you, I was one of the Winooski 44 lawyers, as you recall, Robin.
Yeah.
Right? Me and Jack McCullough, Bill Dorsch, Leslie Black. There were numbers of us. I think there were 6 maybe lawyers who tried that case. I can just tell you what the legal reasoning is behind the lack of the use of the necessity defense, which is not to justify that lack. What they argue is that trespass is a strict liability kind of statute that doesn't allow for any defenses. Essentially, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, if proper notice has been given to you for trespass, that's all they need to prove. So they kind of say that the necessity defense is irrelevant. The reason that we were allowed to use it was because we got the prosecutor to agree that we could use it. The prosecutor was a woman named Karen Shingler, and she said, basically, because she wanted to lump us all in, you guys, all into one group rather than having 6 or 44 individual trials. And she said, you can use the necessity defense if you will try all those people as one trial. And that's why. However, I think we should challenge that. I don't know how exactly. What do you guys think, Jared and Kurt? Where's Jared? Gone?
No, I'm here. Yeah, I mean, what sort of support are they looking for? I mean, we could certainly do one of these. Is there other support that they're looking for? I mean, is there an appeal? Any idea what the process is? Maybe it'd be worth having somebody from their team come in and talk to us.
Yeah, well, the sentencing hasn't happened yet, and the article, which I will send to everyone, does quote some some good guys who argue that a certain person named Lipman has reported dozens of lower courts have allowed juries to hear necessity defenses by war resistors, after which juries have returned not guilty verdicts.
And that's what happened in the Winooski 44. There was an acquittal.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons they don't want to allow it to happen, because
Right.
they would lose the argument.
Right.
Yeah, he writes, it is time, this guy Lippman, to tear down the Berlin Wall that prevents civil resistors from pleading the necessity defense in an attempt to justify their formally criminal conduct, and to open the judicial Politburo to the voices of change. So there are people out there getting exercised about this restriction that's happening now in this court case that's happening in Georgia.
And there is a link here. There is a link to Vermont because we now have nuclear bombers over our heads.
If it's at the sentencing stage, it means the trial has already occurred.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
apparently, yeah.
But we could use, but there's many people, for instance, on the whole fracking cases, they want to use the necessity defense too, and the courts now in Vermont are onto it, and they don't allow it either. But it's an important thing to talk about. I would like to resist. I would like to resist the closure of North Beach. What the hell am I going to do all summer? Anyway,
And
so
tennis courts.
what?
Tennis courts being locked.
I know it. Are they locked?
Yeah, I was there yesterday.
Mm.
Yeah.
Why? 'Cause-
Okay.
why?
So we're full of questions, and we don't have that many answers, and we may have lacked getting some of the people. I invited 3 people from the police commission to join us, and it could be they did, and I think I want to apologize for apparently getting out 2 different links, and the link that was on the website was the good link. And luckily, you all went there and found it, and apparently that was a link I sent to Front Page Forums. So we did get a few extra
That's great.
folks to call in. But
But I think it would be good to follow up with either Vermont Digger or 7 Days to invite them to a continuation of this discussion.
yeah,
Jared, you and I wanted to do something, but maybe I'll take responsibility to call Digger and 7 Days. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody, circulated again, just like a very draft, just to get the ball rolling, press release about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. Somebody wants to edit that, feel free.
I did it one time, and I did,
Yeah.
but I'll do it again if I
Yeah,
can find it.
yeah,
or send it out again to all of us.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Coming up
it was for a sort of related topic, but I think it could easily be adjusted to get the word out as well about this.
What happened to Kurt? Is he gone?
See him.
I'm here.
No, he's-
Kurt, because I wanted to see whether we could do, I don't know if it would be effective. I would like to see if we could do what's happening with the Zoom and get it recorded and sent to Lauren Glenn.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, because Ian would be into it. And by the way, poor Pete Garitano, you know what happened to him?
No.
He got stuck in Costa Rica. Not a bad place to be stuck, but he got stuck in Costa Rica, was unable to get home until the end of this month because there are no flights. But then he tells me today that maybe he doesn't want to come back. So I kind of begged him. I said, you got to come back and be a fighter about it. So he is coming back if he can get here.
Okay, so everyone should consult their flyer because next week is Israel and Palestine, 1 state, 2 state, no state solutions. And who are going to be the speakers, Sandy?
Ian Stokes.
Only?
And me, I'll try to moderate it. But yeah, Moose is not feeling great and chose not to do it. But he might be in the discussion group.
So that's week after next,
Oh, that's next week.
Next week.
next week.
And after that, the state of community media, public access TV, and the possibility of democracy. And so Lauren Glenn is lined up for that.
Yeah, she is, but I'll have to remind her because she closed down the studio, you know?
Yeah.
But she says that they are there now. And by the way, I do a radio program on the Radiator. I did it today. The Radiator is a community radio station. I don't know the dial number, but I do it because I'm really committed to doing something like this. We have to, in my mind, we have to try to change the consciousness around this whole thing. Okay?
Is anybody interested in working with me on attempting to get the courts to open for the purposes of considering constitutional matters?
Sure, I'll help in any way I can, but I don't know how you do it. But a letter?
What I'd like to do is have a letter circulated among attorneys and other types.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could
Okay.
help you circulate it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and I'm going to turn off the recording, but you can keep